Hi friends, I'm Sarah. Welcome back to my channel, Sunset Bow Tarot. So I have a couple of interesting decks that I wanted to take a look at today. Basically what happened is a couple of weeks ago, I got contacted by the company Artisan Tarot, and they wanted to offer me one of their decks to take a look at and potentially review on my channel. And a lot of what they do is sort of focused on historical reproduction decks, oftentimes historical reproductions of historical Marseille decks, which is really, really cool. But it's not an area that's always been super of interest to me specifically, just because I am much more comfortable as a Rider-Waite-Smith reader. I have learned to read Marseille a bit over time, but I'm still not like super comfortable with it yet, to the point that I feel like I could do a reading for another person with a Marseille deck. But one thing that I found really interesting is that one of the decks that Artisan Tarot had in their shop was this deck, which is the Rider Marseille Tarot deck. So basically a Rider-Waite-Smith deck in the art style of a Marseille. And one of the reasons that I found that really interesting is because I actually already have a deck like that. I have this deck, which is Le Tarot de Marseille Waite, which is a French deck. And I thought it would be kind of fun to just sort of take a look at these two decks. You know, they're the main ones that I'm aware of out there, where it is a Rider-Waite-Smith deck done in the style of a Marseille deck, more of that like historical style, more of the woodblock print kind of style here in terms of the Artisan Tarot deck, but more in terms of the way that the majors are done in this deck. And so I thought it would be kind of cool to sort of take a look at these two, compare them, compare the art styles, and just kind of take a look at, you know, if you're sort of like me and you're the kind of person where you appreciate this more historical art style, but you're not really a Marseille Tarot reader, these are some decks that are out there that are available that give you a little bit of that Marseille flavor while still being readable as a Rider-Waite-Smith deck. So anyway, I just thought we would take a look at these two decks. Now, just to be clear, this deck I did purchase with my own money. This deck was, again, given to me by Artisan Tarot for review on my channel. But of course, you know, anytime I review something, all of my opinions will be my own. And I'll be sharing with you my honest opinions of the deck. Luckily, I do like this deck quite a lot, so my opinions are very good, but you know, just for purposes of understanding that that's my policy when I accept something for review. So I figured we could first start by taking a look at the packaging and presentation of these two decks. This deck comes in a tuck box, so it is a sealed tuck box with a numbered edition. So you can see that I have here number 102 out of 1,000. Yeah, it's a nice tuck box. This one comes in a hard box. The one thing that I will say about this box is that, weirdly enough, the cards themselves are not the same size as the box, so they kind of slide around in there. It's a very sturdy box, but it's just a little bit odd. This deck also comes with a guidebook, and because this is a French deck, this is Le Tarot de Marseille Waite, it does come with a guidebook, and the guidebook has French on one side and English on the other side, which is kind of cool. It's got at least some keywords and some sentences for both upright and reverse meanings for all the cards in the deck. So so that's what that comes with. Also, weirdly enough, it comes with a bag, but this bag is like too small to actually fit the deck, so I don't quite get it. But regardless, that is what comes as far as the packaging in Le Tarot de Marseille Waite. So these are the two decks, and just to be clear, this one on the left is the French deck, Le Tarot de Marseille Waite, and this one on the right is the Artisan Tarot deck, the Rider Marseille. So I'll keep them on the same side throughout the review here so that you can keep track of which is which. And so you can see the backs here. You know, this one just has kind of a nice colorful back. You know, I like it. I don't find it, you know, offensive in any way. This deck has the sort of traditional Rider-Waite-Smith roses and lilies back, but in more of a kind of antiqued look to it, with their sort of like a tea staining or age staining kind of effect to it, which is very cool looking. From a cardstock standpoint, it's a bit thinner and it is linen textured. It's actually a really, really nice feeling cardstock. It's not, you know, it's definitely thin, but it feels pretty high quality, and it feels like it's going to be plenty durable. So so it's a perfectly nice cardstock. I like linen, and I think that the look of this particular artwork being on linen really lends to the artwork. This deck is a little bit, it's got a little bit more of a gloss to it, but it is still like very, very subtle. I mean, I'd say that this deck mostly feels like kind of your basic US Games cardstock, really, in terms of the thickness and in terms of the feel of it. And they're both really nice. You know, they're both relatively matte, and you know, they both definitely have a nice feel. But you can see this one, which is the Tarot de Marseille weight, is a bit thicker. So this one I bet is going to be a little bit easier to shuffle, but I think that they're both going to be quite nice to work with. So one thing that's kind of fun about the Rider Marseille is that it comes with these additional art cards of A.E. Waite and of Pixie, just some Marseille style art done, but portraiture of those two people, you know, who were so instrumental in creating the Rider Waite Smith deck. And so that's kind of a cool addition that I like. And so from here, I figured we could just go ahead and start flipping through the two decks. I just kind of wanted to do a side-by-side comparison of them, since they're both somewhat on this same theme of a Rider Waite Smith deck done with a more Marseille style art style. They come at that in slightly different ways. The one thing that I will say about this one is that even though it is done in that sort of woodblock style of print with the bold primary colors that you do tend to see in historical Marseille style decks, even the majors are definitely Pixie's artwork, but interpreted through that artistic lens. So it looks a lot more like Pixie's artwork, whereas this particular deck has more of a Marseille influence on the actual majors themselves and the way that the majors are depicted. And so as I go through, you'll see that these majors look more like Rider Waite Smith majors, and these majors look more like the majors that you would be more likely to see in a Marseille deck. And so here is the Fool. And so right away here, you can see with the Magician, it is especially obvious. You know, we do have the titles here in French, and we do have definitely more Marseille influence configuration of the card and depiction of the figure on the card, as opposed to this one, which looks very much like Pixie's artwork, but just translated through the lens of that Marseille art style. And here we've got La Papesse, and again, more of a Marseille look over on this side, although definitely with some Rider Waite Smith nods, whereas here it's very much more of a Rider Waite Smith High Priestess. And you can see too the differences in the titles. Definitely a difference here with the Lovers, and this is, you know, one of the sort of frequent differences that's often pointed to between the majors that you would see in a Marseille style deck versus the majors that you see in the Rider Waite Smith deck. You know, we've got the Cupid here and the man, you know, making a decision, whereas we have more of the Adam and Eve with an angel depiction here that is what we typically see in a Rider Waite Smith style deck. One thing that I do find interesting is that both of these decks, because again, they are focused on being more of a Rider Waite Smith based interpretation of the tarot, we do have strength at 8 in both of the decks, even though in a typical Marseille deck, you would see strength at 11 and you would see justice at 8. So in this case, both of the decks do the swapping that you would see in a Rider Waite Smith deck between justice and strength. Here's Justice again at 11. The Hanged Man. Death. Temperance. The Devil. The Tower. The Star. The Moon. The Sun. Here's another example where rather than the single baby on a horse that we have in a Rider Waite Smith style deck, we have the two twins that we see more likely to see in a Marseille style deck. Here we have Judgment and the World. And so here are the minors, and this is where, of course, you're going to start seeing a very, very significant difference between a Rider-Waite-Smith style deck versus a Marseille style deck, where in a Marseille style deck, you only have the pips in a specific configuration, as opposed to a Rider-Waite-Smith style deck where all of the minors are fully scenic. One thing that I find interesting is that whereas in this deck, had more of a lean toward the Marseille style in the majors, the minors in this deck are very, very Rider-Waite-Smith. Whereas in this deck, you do see some slight more nods to the Marseille and the way that the Marseille pips are configured than you would in a Rider-Waite-Smith style deck. So we'll see more of that as we continue to flip through, but I just find that really interesting. This leans more Marseille in its majors, this leans more Marseille in its minors, although they are still fully scenic. Like you can see here that these ones look like the ones in a Marseille style deck. Like this is how they're often depicted. They have more of this look to them. And so I just find that really interesting. Whereas, you know, the ones in here are sort of leafy sticks that you would normally see in a Rider-Waite-Smith style deck. Again, the ones here look more like a Marseille deck. Here's the 9 again, definitely some Marseille influence there, and also the 10. And so here we have our court cards, and again, it's all in French in the French deck, the Terre de Marseille weight, whereas we have font that looks more like Pixie's font in the Rider Marseille. All right, moving on to the cups. And again, even in some of the ways that the numbers are laid out and the way that the cups are depicted, there is more of that Marseille influence, especially some specific historic decks where the cups are drawn more in that way. Whereas this one, again, is sort of more of just the Rider-Waite-Smith artwork interpreted through a little bit more old world kind of style. We have 4 of cups, and the 5, the 6, and the 7. I really like the artwork of both of these decks. I think that they're both really cool looking. I intend to hang on to both of them. I'm actually planning to spend the month of July reading with these decks, probably the first half with one and the second half with the other. But I'm really looking forward to it because I very much enjoy the overall art style here. Here we have the swords, and you can really see here the Marseille influence in the way that the pips are depicted in the cards. How the way that they're laid out is very much similar to the way that you would see them laid out in a Marseille deck, with some exceptions, such as here, where you see, one of the swords down here, and you don't have that sort of symmetrical layout of the swords up here on the 4. I find it really interesting, the different artistic choices that were made in these 2 decks in terms of how to depict the pips. And then finally, we have the coins. And I do find it interesting that in this deck, the coins are depicted as coins, whereas in this deck, they very much are depicted as pentacles. So again, there are sort of varying levels of inspiration being taken from the Rider-Waite-Smith in both of these decks. All right, so there we have it. Again, I just thought it was really interesting that I ended up with two decks that were sort of on this same theme of a Rider-Waite-Smith deck done in more of a Marseille-inspired style. And I just thought it would be kind of cool to compare the two. I think both of them are really, really cool, to be perfectly honest. I really, really like artistically how both of them are done. They're slightly different in terms of, again, the level of inspiration and where that was taken from Marseille versus from the Rider-Waite-Smith in both of the decks. But I think both of them are cool, and I think both of them are going to be fun to read with. So I'm really looking forward to working with both of these decks in the month of July and seeing how it goes. Again, this one here on the left is called Le Tarot de Marseille-Waite. This is a French deck. It's by Emmanuel Iger and Alice Laverty. And it's a really beautiful deck. I had to order this deck from France when I did order it. I've had it for a while, but I think it's really, really cool, and I enjoy the art style of it a lot. And this deck, again, is the Rider Marseille by Alejandro R. Rosan. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. And again, this is a deck from Artisan Tarot that was supplied to me for purposes of review. And I will be putting information about both decks and where they can be found in the description box down below. So check that out if you're interested in purchasing either of these decks. Like I said, I think it's really fun that, you know, they have very much that Rider-Waite-Smith style of scenic pips, but there's different kinds of Marseille influence on the artwork in both of them. And that to me is just a really fun kind of blending of old and new tarot traditions, which I think is cool. So anyway, hope you enjoyed taking a look at these two interesting decks with me, and have a great one, everybody. Bye-bye.